Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Catherine. Welcome to Verdant. Verdant is a business coaching platform where we help you develop your processes and we turn them into documentation for you to have access. We also build up your why and we get you onto the road of actualizing your best years ahead. So, Verdant Business Coaching is a reorganizing hub for small businesses. I hope that you're going to stay tuned and listen to the nuggets that we're going to have as picked up from the Bible. I had already captured chapter 1, which is the creation story, and now we're going to be moving on to chapter 2 and up to chapter 11. Okay, so here we go. So as we develop your processes and help you do a step-by-step execution and documentation, the Word of God is going to be center. And we also try and answer your big why. Why are you doing this? Alrighty, so chapter 2, Genesis chapter 2 is really just after the creation of man and woman, and God breathed his life. Now, life, the ruach, is what we're really composed of. As human beings, we're not just made up of flesh and blood and cells. We actually have a living life, which is a spiritual, immortal, immutable part of us. Whereas the body will decay, we have parts of our being that will never ever go away. And what God did after the creation is that he breathed life into the human being. Now, you'll soon see that in the King James Version particularly, he talks of resting and taking a reprieve from his work, meaning that he had completed his work. And the other thing is that he caused it to rain. There was a mist that came from the earth that watered the face of the ground. Now, structurally speaking, it is not enough that you create systems, that you have a business name, and that you have registered your business and you have departments. There has to be a life into this business. Does it have a culture? Does it have a life of its own? Is there a vibe? You step into receptions of businesses, and depending on who has been there and what they espouse as their values, whatever is on paper doesn't matter until you feel the atmosphere. There's an intangibility to any business, and it's got to be centered on God. Some of the things that you pick up as a business are your founder members' temperament, their air of whatever it is, their excellence. It will be in the air. It will be the intangible aspect. So there are things that will stay for generations of the business unless if you don't take care of it, or unless you take care of it, they will become ingrained even in the walls, in the paperwork, in the physical, tangible aspects of your business. So it says that a river went out of Eden in verse 10 to water the garden, and it was parted and became 4 heads. Now this river that we're talking about has 4 parts. There's Pison, there's Havilah, and then there's Gihon, and then there's one more, Euphrates. So apparently, when it comes to this river Pison, it is well described. It even has the description of where it passed through and the gold that was there, and there are a lot of descriptions that are into this particular river, and we don't quite get to know much about this river Euphrates. It's just Euphrates. So, and the 4th river is Euphrates. I'm sure there's a lot to be said about it, but as a company, can you see that your territory is well watered? Is it a premium market that has gold, that has beryllium, that has onyx stones? And then the 2nd river was Gihon, that passed through the whole of Ethiopia. Some of the businesses that we have are for mass production. They have mass goods. And then the 3rd one is Hedikel, which goes toward the east of Assyria, that's a region, goes towards east. So do you have regional presence, or do you have a whole place to yourself? And then there's the 4th, which is Euphrates, and that's all we know about it. So do you have any footprint? If you have a footprint simply existing as a business, then you need to be looking at your markets being vast, if maybe that's what you want, and then also tapping into the good gold. It says good gold in verse 12. And then God said, it is not good that man should be alone. So the best partner in your business is the Holy Spirit. As for Adam, so with a business, we need a partnership. And in this case, the partner was Eve. And you need to know that your best partner is God himself. He's the one that adorns you with the wisdom, the know-how, the wherewithal to do what you need to do. And he called Adam is one who named every living creature, by the way, and it's very important that we look into the names of the things that we're involved in. Give the right names, and the names stick. So have a long-term view of the names that are given. Then shall a man leave his father and mother and shall cleave into to his wife. Even as a business, there's sometimes you need to detach yourself from previous associations or associations that are not going to build you as a business. Then so that's chapter 2 for you. Had done a longer recording, but it looks like it disappeared when I deleted some data, so that's why this sounds rushed. But do get in touch with me if you would like any further exposition or explanation on any of the things that I've spoken of. So God created the world, and that's well covered in an earlier podcast. And I believe that if there's anything that is not coming to mind right now, I'll be able to cover it as we go along. So chapter 3 of Genesis talks about the fall of man and him falling for the lie of the serpent. So there are conversations that we shouldn't be having. The serpent had a conversation with the woman. The woman agreed to have this conversation with it. First of all, the question that the serpent asked was a bit tacky. He asked, ye hath God said ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden. Now that's already twisted. It's a messed up question. And then the woman responds with a bit of emphasis, or that is almost hyperbolic in nature. So this conversation was a no conversation from the word go. And in the same lines, we need to be thinking about what is the motive or intent of the people who are questioning us. It's not every journal that you want to be talking to. It's not every media outlet. It's not every person that looks for information. Test their spirit. If this woman, Eve, had tested the spirit of the serpent, you'd have known that this was not a good conversation already. So the eyes of them were opened after they ate, and this woman saw that, the fruit was desirable and it was good functionally to eat. And we talked about your business needs to be good as both a function, but also within its ethos. It needs to be aesthetically packaged. So it's good enough. It's not good enough that you're just functionally working, but the question is there an aesthetic angle? Can people actually appreciate the packaging that you come with? Do they appreciate the fact that you're branded well, which is what the packaging is? So what the woman saw was that both were tick. However, despite the functionality and the aesthetics, there was one immutable instruction which was given by God himself: do not eat. So you've got to look at the natural laws and the physical laws of the land. Where there's a do not, it doesn't matter how lucrative the deal looks like, how functional it will be, how practical it is a no. Don't go there. And then when they heard the voice of the Lord walking in the garden, they hid themselves. And this is a problem. When we're in trouble, we hide ourselves. Even when we have previously had an open, transparent relationship with our sponsors, with our partners, with the people who had our back, suddenly we can't face them when we do the wrong thing because we know we've done messed up. So we're trying to cover up the books from the auditors, trying to cheat and lie our way into acceptance, into some a body or practice or a regulatory body, because we know we have skeletons in the closet. So do not get to that place where you have skeletons in the closet if you are not willing to face the consequences. And Adam and Eve both were told the consequences, which was death, for getting themselves into trouble by disobeying God. So there was a list of punishments that God gave as a result of this sin. Number one, he put enmity between the woman and the serpent. Number two, the woman had also her own set of consequences, and these are consequences that were not even mentioned by God earlier. So sometimes you don't even want to know the fine print. If it says don't do it, and don't do it. If there's a law against something, then you don't want to go into the fine print, because the process of going through court and the litigation will even reveal more penalties than you even knew from the word go. So the penalty, as God stated, was death. But now all of a sudden, we are looking at not just death, we're looking at the woman having childbirth pains and still being ruled by her husband, and Adam himself, the cursed ground and everything. So we don't want to go through that drama. So if there's a law in the natural sense where you know that culturally this is not acceptable, and that's why it is good for organizations to settle in a territory and find out what is the culture behind it, because there are some things that are not written on paper, they're not encoded law. It is just known that that's how it is. And that's why Muslims do business with Muslims. Hindus find it easy to do business with Hindus because it's just beyond the laws of the land. There's also the religion and the cultural background. Therefore, the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden. So this is Adam. He has sinned, and he's sent out of the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he had taken. Okay, so notice in verse 24, he drove out man and placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims. Now, cherubims were sent to enforce what God had done, which is to throw out Adam and Eve. And in the same sense, we need to enforce what we have prohibited. It is not enough for an organization to just say, don't do this. It is, if you do this, this and this will happen. And actually, when you have people that have infringed or gone against the code or the law or the policy, then they are not only just going to be thrown out, you need to put in place mechanisms to ensure that they are not going to ever return to a privileged position again. And that is the people who breach your trust, the people who you have tested, like God tested Adam to see his disobedience or obedience levels. And once he disobeyed, he no longer had the privilege of being in the Garden of Eden. So even you, there are lessons here. There are people that you have to get rid of and keep out, and have the mechanism to keep them out. In the case of God, he had the cherubim and a flaming sword. Two things. There's a cherubim, but also he held and a flaming sword. It doesn't say he held, it says, and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. Enough said, right? Because God needed to protect the tree of life. We need to protect ourselves. We need to protect our patents, our copyrights, whatever. There are lessons we learn when people we trusted become untrustworthy, and they are not supposed to be repeated again. Those lessons should not be repeated. So in chapter 4 of Genesis, we continue with now Eve. They've settled into the Garden of Eden, and they have a son. So it says that Adam knew Eve and his wife, that is, Adam knew Eve, his wife. So this comes into partnerships. When you are in a partnership, like Adam was in a partnership with his wife Eve, they were in an intimate partnership, and it takes partnership to conceive great ideas. So Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived. We don't do touch and go very well. As human beings, you know, it's not as easy to just come together, brainstorm, and then come up with a great idea. It takes at multiple levels of contact, multiple contacts, so that you are able to say, I know this person, I can trust them, and I'm going to do business with them. Okay? And she conceived. Assume this is an idea. This is a seed. An idea can be termed as a seed. And bare Cain. Cain is the fruit of an idea. He is a man. Now look what Eve said. And bare Cain and said. So she conceived, bore Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. From the word go, she called Cain a man, meaning that she had recognition of the eventuality of this baby being a man at the stage where it was just a baby. And so must we. In the mind, we have a concept, but it must be treated as a fully grown child. Even when you have given birth at the product launch, it must be treated as a mature product. In other words, our minds have reality. Treat it as a reality even when it's a concept, and you will respect it. So Shia gave birth to Abel, and then we have the story of Cain and Abel. And Cain actually murdered Abel out of the fact that he did not follow instructions. And this is what God told him. Again, we see the same problem of Adam being in Cain, because there was issued out an instruction. He said, the Lord said to Cain, why art thou wroth? Why is thy countenance fallen? Now there are two things you need to know about Abel and about Cain. Now Cain was a tiller of the ground while Abel kept sheep. In the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought the fruit of the ground. So the ground not only yielded fruit, regardless of being cursed, it actually gave fruit. So God was gracious enough, in spite of the cursing of the ground, that it would give thorn and thistles and man would struggle. He actually was gracious enough to have the ground still becoming fruitful when worked on, meaning that there'll always be something good even in a bad situation. Then he gave it as an offering to the Lord. And then Abel also brought the firstlings of his flock, of the fat thereof, and God had a respect unto Abel and to his offering. So why is that? Because he gave the first, even before he had enjoyed the fruit of his labor. He gave it to God first as a sacrifice. And that goes to tithing and giving back. Thanksgiving as a business. Are you giving back to God even before you enjoy? And this is Abel's tribute. This is God's tribute to Abel, that for Cain, he did not respect the sacrifice, but for Abel, the Lord respected unto Abel and to his offering. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering, because the offering of the fruit of Abel's work was actually of good quality, and Abel's heart was actually clean as well. So now Cain's heart had a problem. It was murky, and out of a murky heart comes a low quality product, and that's the truth. His attitude was off. So even when it comes to hiring your employees, what is their attitude? Are they grateful? Are they kind? Are they generous? Do they respect you? Do they respect what you're doing as a person who has put in effort into their lives? So then when you have this kind of attributes to a person, you already know what to expect of their work, because it is clear who they are from what they are meditating on and practicing internally. Internal becomes external. Okay. So the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel their brother? And he said, am I my brother's keeper? That's already a problem. Why is he saying, am I my brother's keeper? Yeah. And we see that God had given instruction, and he said to Cain, if thou doest well, shan't thou be accepted? And if you do not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. So in other words, when you don't do what you're supposed to do, then therein lies a higher affinity for sin, because at the point of not following instructions, there is a losing of the bull's eye, or the perfect will of God is not followed, and then we become more susceptible to sin. And God told him, you must master that sin. Thou shalt rule over him. Now he called that feeling, that desire of sin, that sin, he called it a person. You must rule over sin. Now, most of the time we don't want to acknowledge it, but there is actually a spirit realm in our lives, and the sin is a person, it's a devil. So the devil wants you to fall into sin, and you must rule over him. The only way to rule over the enemy is to rule over sin and the desire to sin. Okay, so we see the attitude of Cain about being his brother's keeper, and the Lord said unto him that he would be cast out again out of the presence of God, meaning that there was still the presence of God even outside of Eden. So there's still grace. So when thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength, a fugitive and a vagabond, thou shalt you be. So he gave the punishment again. You must be able to do a punitive, policy on people who don't do as is, because they will ruin the fabric of the organization if they remain. However, God in his mercy still gave him a safety net. What did he do? He said he would put a mark on him that whoever slayeth Cain, because Cain was like, look, your punishment is too much. I will be killed by anyone who comes my way. And you still see his attitude here when his scenario that he's put in his head is, I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. So he's already projected that people are going to come after him and kill him. But God puts a mark on him and says, lest any finding you should kill you. Then, he says, whoever tries to do that, then there will be a vengeance taken upon him sevenfold. So even when we let people go, even if it's an employee or a partner or a consultant or somebody who messes you up, there is a grace that is still extended by God to this murderer. So you need to extend a grace meaning something that you can, make it up to them to some extent, something that isn't gonna cost you so much, but still it is something for them to hold on to for their own dignity, as a sign that you're not enemies and there's no hatred and all that. So Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And note that Cain went and built a city. Okay, he lived and dwelt in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So it made him have to rethink his options. So there's always an option. Even when we are cast away, there's always an option of what to do. And then Enoch was born Irad, and Irad began Methuel, and Lamech had 2 wives. Now this is Lamech, the grandchild of Cain. The name of the one who was Ada and the other one Zillah. Now Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of such that dwell in tents. So again, look at the identity. Everyone has their own identity. Despite the fact that they're children of Lamech, they all have their own identity. And there are things that come out of God's providence, and God himself gives these kinds of gifts to people. We see that there was Tubal Cain, an instructor of every artifice of brass, and there was Jabal. He was the father of such as handle the harp and organ. And, there was Ada, who bare Jabal, and that was Jabal I've just talked about. Jabal was the one who dwells in tents and has cattle. Jubal was the father of all that handle the harp and organ. That's an instrumentalist and, a musician. And all these are talents to show you that you can have talent, but not godliness. It's talent, it's good, but it doesn't mean that these people are pure of heart. Okay. And Lamech said unto his wife, so Lamech knew about his great-grandfather, Cain. He said, hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech. For I have slain a man to my wounding. In other words, a man hurt me, and I wounded him. I slayed them. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and 7. And Adam knew his wife. So there is a legacy here, and you must be a witness to this. Even in the Bible, people remember what you did and what God did. As a result of Cain's sinning was remembered. God had put a mark on him and said, whoever tries to harm you, I will come after them, and they will have vengeance, my vengeance sevenfold. And Lamech knew this, and he used it as a precedent and said, if that's what happened to Cain, then this is what's going to happen for me. God is going to be avenging me too. Now notice that even in your organization, there are policies and there are rules and there are things that you did that are not even written anywhere that people will always draw from. So the question is it as a good example or a bad example? So Adam knew his wife again, and she bore Seth, for God said, she hath appointed me another seed. For God said, she hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel. So there's a replacement. There's always room for replacement. There's always room. Nobody's indispensable. There's always room for replacement. And to Seth, to him also was born a son who called his name Enos, and then men began to call upon the name of the Lord. At some point, you need, as an organization, to learn to call upon the name of the Lord. Strategies go wrong, products fail, people fail you, learn to call upon the name of the Lord. I'll be back after this break. I'll be back with the rest of the chapters in Genesis. Bye bye. See you.